Well, I seem to be on a video making spree. Um, People are leaving comments like gangbusters on the last video I made for obvious reasons. It's something that's going to be controversial and thought provoking, and everybody wants to throw in their 2 cents and give me advice and tell me what they think I should be doing with my life. And I'll get back to replying to all those. But in the meantime, this one comment left by this guy Rob Kazan. I'm not going to go into reading the whole thing because I already know this video is going to be so long that it's going to really piss people off. But the long and short of it is he basically says, hey, you've got problems in your life, try drugs. Well, the Fakesagan, the Christopher Anderson, whatever you want to call me, I have done all the drugs, guys. I've done all the drugs. I don't really do them anymore. It's kind of ironic. When me and TJ were best friends, I was smoking weed every day and he wouldn't touch the stuff, and now he's on the DP, like smoking blunt after blunt, and I'm pretty much straight edge at this point. I'm still addicted to the nicotine. What are you going to do about that? I'm working on it, guys. But I've kind of moved past my drug phase. I feel like I've thoroughly plumbed the depths of that cavern and found every secret there is to find. Maybe that's arrogant, but that's kind of how I look at it. But I'm thinking back, and I've made one or two videos about drugs here on YouTube, but I've never really made like an extensive trip report video where I really get into some of my experiences with drugs, and I think that's something I want to do now. And it's not without a hint of trepidation that I make this video, because I know that a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are going to sound really cool and interesting, and some of the more younger and impressionable viewers are going to say like, wow, that sounds awesome, I got to go try this myself. And I'm not like some Bible thumping guy that's like morally opposed to doing drugs. As I said in my comment reply to him, the Bible doesn't say thou shalt not toke or trip not lest ye be stoned. But, I feel like drugs, by and large, are just kind of a waste of time. I won't even say they're really a negative impact on your life, unless you become addicted to them and make a habit of it and, start losing your job and shirking your responsibilities and things like that. But they're just a waste of time. Because I feel like while it is possible to have deep insights and meaningful experiences while you are on drugs, you can have those same insights and experiences just as easily sober. And you can reach them through other means besides doing drugs, like, some experience of elation that you have, or let's say a traumatic, harrowing experience in your life can also bring about those kind of insights. You can reach them through meditation, through prayer, through fasting, through just contemplation. So I kind of feel like drugs are just sort of a blind alley. It's kind of like a wrong turn, a waste of time. Not to mention money and if you're not lucky, legal consequences, medical problems, which I was lucky enough to avoid anything like that. I did have a couple of ODs. That's neither here nor there, but, I don't even think I'm going to waste time talking about those. You all know what an OD is. I mean, if you've seen Train Spotting, like, there's nothing really, there's no original content here, so why waste my time? So the purpose for me making this video is that I'm hoping that some people who might be considering doing this stuff, maybe, you'll be content to just hear about it from me, and you'll feel like it's not really worth your time because you already know what it's about. I feel like my descriptive power and narrative force might be enough that by me merely telling you about what it's like to trip on mushrooms, for example, then you'll feel like you did trip on mushrooms, so why waste your time and money? So that's what I'm going for here, and I'm going to talk about some of my drug experiences. Now, which drugs have you done, Fakesagan? Pretty much all of them. Excluding some of the ones that I really kind of knew what it was about from the outset and didn't want to do it to myself, like crack. But I've done all of the big drugs that you've probably heard of: cocaine, heroin, PCP. Oh boy, I mean, I could run down the list all day long because there's so many drugs, and trust me, guys, I've done them all. Um, and I'm not going to talk about the ones that you all probably kind of know what they do, like heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine, which yes, I have done. But because I feel like people know what this stuff is about, you know what the effects are, so why would I waste a video talking about stuff like that? And I'm not even going to talk about every psychedelic I've done, because oh man, I've done them all. With the exclusion of DMT, can't get my hands on it. That stuff's hard to find, and I don't feel like going through all the extraction and shit. I have actually performed alkaline extractions before. Um, But I'm just not gonna, I don't care. I don't care about drugs. Been there, done that. Got the T-shirt. So I'm not going to talk about every psychedelic I've done, but I am going to talk about the more interesting experiences. Not necessarily the more interesting drugs, but the more interesting experiences. So let's launch into that right now. Actually, no, let's not launch into it because there's one other thing I want to talk about first, and that's this concept of the psychonaut. Now, for those who aren't into the drug community, you probably haven't heard this term. It's a portmanteau of like psychology, the psyche, and not explorer like astronaut. The term is psychonaut, and this was coined by Professor Terence McKenna. Now, I have a lot of opinion about this term because even when I was into drugs and I was doing them frequently, I would roll my eyes every time somebody said this shit. And here's the reason why. I see it as a extension of the same kind of euphemism, dysphemism, um, 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 dichotomy that you'll always find with class disparity between the rich and the poor. It's like the poor guy who's not right in the head is crazy, and the rich guy who's not right in the head is eccentric. We see this kind of thing all the time. Well, as you know, the term psychonaut, it just bothers me because if you're like an upper class Ponce academic like Timothy Leary or Terence McKenna, then you get to be called a psychonaut when you do drugs and just get fucked up and trip balls. Whereas if you're some homeless guy slumped in an alley, fucked up out of your head, then you're just a junkie, right? This whole psychonaut idea, it's just so, it's annoying to me. Every time I hear this, I'm like, fuck you, Terence McKenna, you're a junkie. Just admit it. Um, like I don't understand why guys like William S. Burroughs get to make their drug use seem somehow legitimate and interesting and cool and prestigious, whereas when the rest of us do it, we're just dope fiends. So the whole psychonaut thing, that's all I've got to say. Oh boy, I've already wasted like 9 minutes on preamble, and I haven't even gotten to the first drug yet. This video is gonna piss people off. Oh, it's so long, don't watch it. Okay, well anyway, let's get to the first meaningful experience. LSD. I tried this for the first time when I was 15 years old. Now, LSD is a psychedelic that I don't particularly enjoy, and in fact, it's probably my least favorite of that class. And because the reasons are that, number one, the body load sucks. For those who don't know these terms, body load is the physical effect of the drug as opposed to the mental, cerebral, psychoactive kind of effect. It's the way it makes you feel. When I'm on LSD, your mileage may vary. I feel dirty and gross. Like it feels like your skin has a wet, clammy feeling, and you feel kind of queasy and sick to the stomach. The same as with mushrooms or mescaline, and you just feel bad. You feel sick. You feel just diseased and dirty in some way, and it's not pleasant. Also, I find that drug is a bully. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are some psychedelics that you can kind of choose to ignore the effects of if you want to. Like, even when you're tripping balls, you can just kind of be like, well, I'm going to turn this off for a minute. I've got to drive my car. I've got to answer a work email. I've got shit to do. Like, I'm just going to kind of put this to the side, and then when I want to, I'll kind of let the trip take over again. With LSD, it just kind of grabs you by the neck and says, motherfucker, you will pay attention to me. And I find that you get these intrusive thoughts you can't dismiss, and sort of tape loops that go through your head over and over and over again, which I thought were depicted very well in Pink Floyd's The Wall, which of course is all about tripping on LSD, because it that really depicts the way these thoughts will go these thoughts will go through your mind over and over again. These thoughts will go through your mind over and over again. These thoughts will go through your mind over and over again. These thoughts will go through your mind over and over again. You guys get the picture. That's what LSD is like. Oh man, it sucks. You guys who know me know that I'm an anarchist. Much like the Amazing Atheist, like what he said in his interview with Brett Keane, he has a pathological aversion to authority. I kind of have that too, although I consider mine probably isn't as pathological as his is. But I don't like people telling me what to do and what to think. So by the same turn, I don't like drugs telling me what to do and what to think. And that's exactly what LSD does. It's just like a big mean bully that pushes you around for a couple hours until it wears off. And then the come down is just long and slow and shitty. Now, what about the typically reported experiences? Like, did you hallucinate? Did the walls move? Do you see patterns? Do you hear voices in your head? Yeah, all that stuff. These are commonly reported effects. So why would I waste my time talking about the stuff that everybody knows? And as far as ego death and like this feeling of unity between all living things and blah, 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 I never actually had that with LSD. I have experienced things like that with other psychedelic drugs, and I'll get into that later in the video. But with LSD, not so much, even though I did use very high doses on numerous occasions. I've used that one more than once, despite the fact that I don't like it. I guess I kept on kind of playing Russian roulette and hoping that the next chamber was going to be like the awesome one. Like, oh man, this is going to be the LSD experience I was supposed to have, and the one that everybody talks about. Never really had it. Anyway, though, so why am I even including this on the list at all? What about this experience was special and unique? Well, LSD had an amazing and long-lasting therapeutic effect on me, which I actually think should be explored by medical science for potential use. And of course they never will, because DEA and the law and blah, blah, blah. But so here's the deal of what LSD did for me. Ever since early childhood and up until age 15, when I did LSD for the first time, I had very pronounced symptoms of OCD. How pronounced? Very pronounced. Like, for example, if I was walking down the sidewalk, I always had to put my right foot over every crack between the blocks of the sidewalk pavement. It could never be the left foot. It always had to be the right foot. So obviously it would take me a long time to get down the street. When I was sitting in class at school, I always had to have every object on my desk oriented kind of in a northwest direction. Like, everything had to be slanted, diagonal, pointing up and to the left. The pencil, the paper, the eraser, whatever I had, it always had to be pointed that way. It could never just be sitting there, hodgepodge, however the pieces fall. And I also had this OCD compulsion to read stuff that I knew was inconsequential. So here's an example. I could be walking down the street, and let's say I pass a sign that has some verbiage on it, and for whatever reason I don't read it. I could get a quarter mile down the street, and I would have to backtrack. I'd be like, shit, what did that sign say? I've got to know. It could be important. And even though I know it wasn't important, because this is how OCD works. Like, you have OCD, but you have to do it anyway. Hence compulsion, rather than delusion. Delusion is when you think something is real. A compulsion is when you know it's not real, but you just got to do it anyway. So even though I know the sign that I passed just said something like "keep our highways clean" or 5 miles till next rest stop or something like that, like, I would have to go back and read the fucking sign, and oh man, that shit was annoying. Well, anyway, the first time I tried LSD, and it was a low dose. I only did one square of like some, well, actually, it was pretty decent blotter paper. I think it was like orange sunshine acid or something like that. Um, After that, those symptoms cleared up completely like a bad case of acne. They were just gone. And the weirdest thing is I didn't even notice for a while. Like it took a few days before I just suddenly started to notice, like, hey, I'm not doing any compulsive behaviors anymore. I'm walking down the sidewalk normally. My desk is a mess and I don't care. I just passed a sign and who gives a fuck what it said. And it took me a while to put the pieces together. I was like, well, where did this come from? What happened? What's different? Oh, right. It was that blotter I did like a few days ago. That has to be what it was. And I still believe to this day that that is what it was, because those symptoms, like I said, they began in very early childhood and they lasted all the way up till age 15. After the first time I did acid, gone, completely gone. So, even though I said at the beginning of this video that, I'm not recommending for anyone to try drugs, and I actually encourage you not to do them, if you suffer from a bad case of obsessive compulsive disorder, I strongly recommend LSD. Give that shit a try. See if it works for you. I'm just saying, your mileage may vary, but for me, it was like a miracle panacea that just cleared that shit right the hell up. Oh, and quick little afterthought on the LSD thing. It's kind of paradoxical, because when you're on LSD and you're under the effects of the drug, at least if you're me, it's like having temporary OCD. I mean, you will become this compulsive jittery robot with tics and compulsive behaviors and obsessions with meaningless things and thoughts that repeat over and over, thoughts that repeat over and over, thoughts that repeat over and over. I don't know, guys. Maybe that's why it does what it does as far as clearing up that mental disorder, whatever. Okay, so let's move along to the next experience and the next drug. And, of all the times I've tripped balls, which is hundreds and thousands of times, I never really had like, well, no, I have had some transformative experiences. I shouldn't say that, but the most incredible and interesting and singular experience that I've ever had on a psychedelic drug was the time a psychedelic drug temporarily imbued me with psychic power. Guys, I mean, it was crazy. It's something that to this day I'm struggling trying to explain. And what specific type of psychic power are we talking about? Astral projection, remote viewing. That happened to me. And it didn't even happen to me on one of the more interesting psychedelic drugs. It happened with one of the more common, banal, sort of humdrum psychedelics that you can actually find in your corner pharmacy, DXM, aka dextromethorphan-hydrobromide. Now, this is the stuff in cough syrup when people talk about robo-tripping, sipping on some scissor and the tussin and all that. That's what they're talking about. You can trip off of it by drinking bottles and bottles of Robitussin. And be sure you check the right one and make sure that the ingredients are just DXM and not like acetaminophen and guaifenesin and all that other stuff, because you could hurt yourself. And the fact that I'm even saying this is merely harm reduction. In other words, I'm not encouraging you to do it, but if you do it, then I want to make sure that you do it right and don't hurt yourself. Another thing about DXM is that you do not want to do this stuff too much at too high doses and too often, because it leads to repeated extensive high dose use can cause genuine anatomical damage to the structure of the brain in the form of something called Olney's lesions, named after the doctor who discovered them, Dr. Olney. And what we're talking about here are spongiform microperforations in the brain tissue. In other words, holes in your fucking brain. It turns your brain into Swiss cheese. How does it do this? Because it keeps your axons firing over and over and over and over and over. It keeps the synapses firing and firing and firing. And they heat up and they burn out. And it literally fries your brain. It cooks your brain. Now, you're not going to have that issue if you only do it once or twice. You do it now and then, even at high doses, you're going to be fine. This stuff was developed, unless I'm mistaken, by the German Merck pharmaceutical company. I think in the 20s and 30s. It might have been somebody else. It might have been Eli Lilly, one of the other ones. I don't know. I think it was Merck. But anyway, they originally developed this as a anesthetic for use in surgery, and it was considered like a miracle drug for a while until people began to notice the problems from using this. And then it finally reached its ultimate culmination as a antitussive in over-the-counter cold remedies. Now, DXM, in its capacity as a psychedelic, it falls into the class of dissociative psychedelic drugs. This would include things like Special K ketamine and PCP. And what that basically means is it makes you feel like you're outside of yourself. It's kind of like this temporary psychosis where you just feel like you're out of your body. Now, anyway, the experience that I'm discussing, even though I have robo-tripped on the scissorp, this was not a tussin experience. I was getting pure powder form DXM from there are supply companies on the internet where you can get chemicals like this, and there's loopholes and stuff, and you can just get your hands on it. And I decided to take a very heavy dose one day. I was actually on the phone with one of my psychonaut, aka junkie friends, who I knew from the internet. I'd never met this guy in real life. And, I'm talking to him, and I'm like, hey, man, you know what? Shit, there's nothing going on right now. I got nothing to do for the rest of the day. I'm dropping 3 grams of the D, baby. 3 grams of the substance D. I'm dropping some death, man. I'm fucking doing this. And he's like, oh, shit, 3 grams, bro. Yo, stay on the phone. Stay on the phone with me so you can talk about the whole experience. Relate the whole thing. We'll do like a kick-ass trip report, man. I'm there with you for this whole thing, man. Let's do this. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing it, man. So I capped up 3 fucking grams. And that is a lot of DXM. I mean, this stuff is usually measured in the milligram doses. So 3 grams is just a fucking sledgehammer to the dome. Now, one of the things that people theorize about drugs is that part of what causes the psychoactive effect is your expectations of what's going to happen. For example, there was no recorded history of tobacco use in Europe before Sir Walter Raleigh brought it over from the New World, from the Americas. And in the Americas, people who used tobacco and nicotine would report having psychoactive effects and almost having like a trip. And whereas, when it was brought over to Europe, people just experienced a stimulant effect, a mild stimulant effect. So there might be something to be said for like your expectations of what the drug is going to do to you, causing it to do that. And I had never heard any reports of people taking DXM and having out-of-body experiences, psychic experiences, astral projection, remote viewing, anything like that. So this just came out of nowhere. And by the way, if anyone wants to try to replicate this, bear in mind that I had used that drug several times, and never before or since was this effect replicated. It was like a one-time thing. I don't know where it came from. It just happened. But here's what happened. I started to have this out-of-body experience. As I was talking on the phone with this guy, my whole field of vision started being drawn through this tunnel at light speed. And I understood it in my mind to be the inside of like the phone lines. Even though even at the time, because this was a while back, I don't know if they still had physical phone lines. It might have all just been going through the air, radio waves. But for whatever reason, that was what I saw. How could I describe it best? Well, it was just like that scene where they go through the eponymous Stargate in the movie Stargate. It was just like that. And when I came out the other side, I could see a room, and I was kind of viewing it from like up in the ceiling corner of the ceiling area somewhere, like looking down. And I'm talking, as all of this is happening, I'm still on the phone, I'm still talking to this guy, and I said, hey man, are you standing in a white room, leaning up with one hand next to a window, and the window has white Venetian blinds, and you're holding a green glass bottle in your hand, and you're wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt? And he just went dead quiet for like 5 minutes. He didn't say a damn thing. I was like, hello, are you there? he was freaked out because that's exactly the scene of the room he was in, which I had never seen. And just to verify and further freak me out, he took a picture and sent it to me, and it was the room that I saw. And like like what you have to understand is at the time of this experience, I was still an atheist, a strict materialist in my view of reality, and I didn't believe in anything supernatural. So I spent years trying to rationalize away this experience and trying to explain some kind of rational explanation, some kind of weather balloon or swamp gas that would explain why this happened, so I didn't have to accept the fact that there was some kind of psychic element to this. And in case anybody's wondering, Fakesagan today in 2016, I totally believe it was some kind of psychic event. I don't know why it happened. I don't know if the DXM was really involved in some way, but it just happened. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have even included DXM in this list, because DXM is really a kind of boring drug, although it does have some interesting effects. I found, and I've known a lot of other people that do drugs, and we've shared our experiences and talked about this stuff, so they have reported the same thing. Two interesting effects that DXM has that just kind of make you scratch your head and go, It makes you want to put weird inanimate objects in your mouth to like experience them with, like you'll be sitting there chewing on a game controller. You'll be sitting there like chewing on like a Bic lighter, and people will be like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I don't know, I just had to do it. The other thing is, it seems to cause this aversion to authority whenever you do this stuff. Like I found that whenever I'm under the effects of DXM, I'm just like, man, fuck, you see those cops over there, man? Fuck those cops. You see that shit, man? Fuck that. Hey, this dollar bill right here, you see these symbols on the back with the Illuminati eye, man? Fuck the government, man. Fuck the government. I don't know why. It's something about DXM. I mean, if this stuff ever got into the water supply, there would be a revolution tomorrow. I don't know. It's something about the drug. So let's move on to the next drug on the list. And by the way, is anybody taking the title of the video literally at this point, and you think that Fakesagan is actually on drugs and because I'm talking so fast? No, I'm not. It's merely the fact that I have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm trying to talk quickly and keep this video from being 3 hours long. So the next drug on the list is mescaline. In some people's opinion, the king of the psychedelics. And this stuff should come with a fucking warning label, because they do not tell you what it actually does, and I'm going to get into that. Now, where did you get your hands on mescaline? Because there's a lot of drugs that are on the black market that people call mescaline, and it's really anything but. And we know you didn't actually go out to the desert in the Southwest and pick a peyote cactus. No, I didn't. What I actually did is I sent away for the Peruvian torch cactus. I can't remember what it's called, like Trichoceros peruvianus or something like that. But what not a lot of people know is that other cactuses besides just peyote do contain lower levels of mescaline. The San Pedro cactus, which is commonly used in landscaping and as an ornamental plant, you'll find it in there. But the Peruvian torch has the highest levels that you'll find in anything else besides peyote. And what I did is I performed an alkaloid extraction. I can't remember what chemical I used. I can't remember if I used alcohol or something like that, but I performed the extraction. I did it safely. I evaporated all of the solvent off, and I ended up with some pretty high-grade mescaline. And I experimented with it several times, but I'm not going to talk about every time that I did it. I'm going to talk about the time that I had like a breakthrough and really took a high dose. Now, what are some of the more interesting effects of mescaline? Well, synesthesia is a pretty good one. People talk about synesthesia when it comes to other psychedelic drugs like LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, stuff like that, psilocybin, however you pronounce it. But I didn't experience synesthesia with any of those. I only experienced it with mescaline. By the way, what is synesthesia, for those of you who don't know? That's when your senses become cross-wired and mishmashed and crossed. So it's like your smell becomes your sight, and your hearing becomes your sense of tactile touch, and your your sense of taste becomes your vision. This actually happened to me and it happened more than once. When I would experience mescaline, like for example, if I'm in a warm room, my field of vision would be kind of red. And then let's say I picked up a cold glass of water in my hand. The minute my skin touched the cold glass, my entire field of vision would go blue. I mean, it's crazy shit, the way this stuff can rewire your brain. But why do I say that it should come with a warning label? Well, here's the reason why. Everybody kind of talks about seeing God on mescaline. And they say, oh, when you're on mescaline, you're going to see God, man. You're going to see God. What do you want to say to God? Because you're about to see him. Well, they don't tell you the reason why you see God. And I'm going to tell you that right now. The reason is because when you take a high breakthrough dose of mescaline, you will have a very convincing near-death experience. That is exactly what happens. You feel as if you're dying. You think you're dying. Your hands will like cramp up like into claws, and you'll like your skin gets cold and blue, and your breathing and heart rate gets slower. At least they seem like they do. You know, to this day, I don't know how much of these effects were real and how much was just my perception because of the trip. But like, you're just like, oh, I'm dying, and like, you know, I mean, fucking, it is what it is. Like, your brain will grasp for a life raft in that situation. Like, you will fucking just believe whatever to think that you're going to exist for another minute or two. And it's a harrowing experience. I do not recommend mescaline to anybody except the most stalwart trippers. Like, if you've got the mental courage to take this stuff, best of luck to you, and you know, God bless, onward Christian soldier. Like, good luck with that shit. But you better have the balls. Like you better be a tough motherfucker if you're going to take this stuff, because it is hard fucking core. And that's all I'm going to say. Another interesting thing about mescaline is that everything around you comes to life. Even the very air that you breathe seems to be alive. Like, if there's a pencil sitting on the table in front of you, it's going to start slithering and writhing like a maggot. Like, just everything moves. And, you know, things move on other psychedelic drugs. Like, you're on mushrooms, you're on LSD, everything kind of seems like it's moving, undulating, wiggling around, but it doesn't seem to have life. When you're on mescaline, everything is fucking alive. Now, when I say that it makes you see God, am I just merely saying that it's your mind grasping for a life raft, and it's like there's no atheists in foxholes because you think you're going to die? It makes you, you know, want to preserve your existence through some kind of feat of self-delusion. That's not exactly what I'm saying, and here's the reason why. I've had a lot of other near-death experiences, some of which were on drugs and brought about by drugs, some of which were brought about by literally coming close to death, having guns pointed at me, being in high-speed car chases. I've had an interesting life, guys. I've been through a lot of shit, and there have been plenty of times when I was convinced that I was about to die. But when I was an atheist and I was going through stuff like that, you know, I was just like, oh, okay, well, home to oblivion, here we go. And it didn't really bother me. But there's something about mescaline. There's something about mescaline that it will not only give you a near-death experience, which is very convincing and very real, but it will also have a theological flavor to it. And there's no other way I can explain it besides that. Man, I got to wrap this video up. It's already 3:19, and I got to be at Great Vespers at 5 o'clock, so I got to shower up and put on my Saturday best. Fuck. Okay, let's move on to the next drug and the next experience. PCP, phencyclidine, aka illy, wet, embalming fluid, SHRM. This stuff is fucking nasty. I don't recommend it to anybody. It's one of those drugs like crack you probably just shouldn't do. But man, is it ever fucking interesting. This is another one of those dissociative psychedelic class drugs. You know, if you ever wanted to create a zombie apocalypse, Walking Dead type situation in real life, take a couple barrels of this and put it in the municipal water supply, and I guarantee you will see people like walking around half naked, screaming at the moon, covered in blood, with human entrails hanging out of their mouths, and blood and gore underneath their fingernails, because this stuff turns you into a fucking monster. And if you don't believe that, just Google PCP. In particular, Google a rapper from Texas named Big Lurch, who was found, found by the police, in his with his girlfriend's entrails sitting on the coffee table with teeth marks in them, and he was outside in the backyard covered in blood barking at the moon. And that's not a rare effect. That's a common effect. There were cases going as back as the 1970s of like fathers cutting their own children's heads off and boiling them in a pot of water because they thought the baby was the devil, and it was just staring at him with dark soulless eyes. I mean, this stuff is fucking evil. This is a bad drug, and I'm telling you guys, don't ever fucking do it. There's not too many drugs in this video that I'm going to say that about, but this is one of them. Do not fucking do PCP. Do not fucking do PCP. But if you do, you know, you're going to experience the commonly reported side effects, which are ranting about the end of the world. This is something people always do. Look at YouTube videos of people on PCP. You're always going to see them ranting about the end of the world. The end is nigh, the end is nigh, the end is coming. The devil's coming, the devil's after me. Also, it has a tendency to make people divest their clothing, strip naked, and walk out into the middle of the street and fight with cops. I swear this stuff is fucking crazy. This is what it makes you do. Well, anyway, I've done it a couple times. And one time I was living in Washington State. Me and my stepbrother had gone out to a bar to have a few pitchers of beer, watch some sports stuff, which I don't really care about, but he did, and just shoot the shit and have conversations. I like my stepbrother. I get along with my stepbrother, still do. Well, anyway, little did he know, but 5 minutes before he passed me on the street and picked me up in his truck and we went to the bar, I had smoked a wet cigarette. I smoked some PCP. And PCP is bad enough on its own, but when you mix it with alcohol, oh, forget about it. Like, you're done. So anyway, long story short, to this day, I'm not really sure how it happened because I blacked out. I pulled a butterfly knife out of my pocket, and yes, I do know how to do all that schnicky sna stuff, so it must have been pretty scary. And I whipped this motherfucker out, started brandishing it at an entire bar full of people, and we're talking about bikers and shit and like tough dudes. And just being like, come on, motherfuckers, you want a piece of me? I'll fucking kill every last one of you sons of bitches. Come on, come on! Anyway, long story short, before the cops arrived, thankfully, my stepbrother, being a strapping young lad, picked me up, threw me over his shoulders in a fireman's carry, and marched me out the door with me still screaming and brandishing the knife at people, and everybody kind of either recoiling in horror or spoiling for the fight. And that is what PCP will do to you. So, you know, bad drug certainly, interesting drug definitely. Okay, next experience, next drug. Salvia divinorum, diviner sage. It contains the active chemical salvinorin A, and you used to be able to get this stuff through the mail. You used to be able to buy it in convenience stores, and it was kind of like like this spice stuff and bath salts, and it was kind of like a loophole in the DEA regulations where you could get it through. Once again, this is another one of these psychedelic dissociative class drugs. Man, these tend to be fucking pretty interesting. I'm just going to say that right now. Now, this is a plant, so, you know, you could chew the leaves or you could smoke the pure leaves, and you'll have an effect, but you would have to smoke a whole lot of it or chew a whole lot of it to have, like, a real powerful effect. But, of course, the companies that sell this stuff to the public found ways to extract it and make it more and more powerful, and they had, like, 2x extracts, 5x extracts, 50x extracts, and it just got more and more powerful. And me and my friends used to do the good stuff. And like the way you want to do this is like you put in a glass bong and take like one of those crack torch lighters and heat the shit up real fast and just take the biggest hit you can. And usually what will happen if you don't have a breakthrough is when you take the high dose and you get the real effect. But usually what will happen is it's kind of like a psychedelic whippet. It's like you basically trizz for a few minutes. And oh, by the way, do other people use the term trizz? Is that just something my friends invented? I'm really not sure if that's real street slang or not. So trizzing is kind of like trizzing is to tripping what having a buzz is to being drunk. It's like, hey dude, you tripping balls right now? Nah man, I'm just trizzing. Well, anyway, like that's basically what the stuff will do to you. Like you just get kind of dizzy, like the walls move around, and you're like, oh, I'm sort of tripping, kind of not really, and then it wears off real quick. Well, one time I took a high dose. I mean, I guess I just had a breakthrough. I was actually hanging out with me and one of my friends in this warehouse I was working at. This dude was the son of the of the guy who owned the company, and me and him were good friends, and so we could kind of do whatever we wanted at work. And he was like, hey man, I got some salvia, you want to trip? And I'm like, yeah man. And he brings over this steamroller type bong, It wasn't made out of glass. It was like a fucking, I can't remember if it was a metal steamroller or plastic or fucking cardboard or whatever the fuck it was, but it was a steamroller. If you guys know if you smoke weed, you know what the fuck a steamroller is. There's no water involved. It's just a big tube with a ball, and you put your hand over the end, you cook up your hit, and then you take your hand off, and then you go, and it all comes in. Well, anyway, I took a big fucking rip off it, and I became trapped in an alternate dimension for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Are there any Stephen King fans in the audience? Stephen King published a collection of short stories in 1985 called Skeleton Crew, and one of them was called The Jaunt. That's Jaunt. And it's kind of a horror sci-fi story about this technology that's developed that allows for teleportation. But the catch is that you have to be anesthetized when you go through, because if you're conscious and awake, you will be trapped in an alternate dimension for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, even though you really come out the other side like a few seconds later. And when you come out the other side, you're the same physically, but mentally you're this ancient being that's completely insane because you haven't had any sort of social contact for millennia. Well, that is exactly what a Salvinoran breakthrough is like. I mean, this shit is fucking nasty and harrowing. Now, what was the alternate dimension that I went into like? Here's the only way I can describe it, and it's really tough because, I can try to describe it in a visual way, but this sort of crosses the lines between visual and mental. Like, I'm not sure which it really was. But I experienced a mosaic made out of tiles. It almost kind of looked like Lego blocks. And I was part of this mosaic. And so was every other creature in the world, every other living thing, every mountain, every tree. It was all part of this tile mosaic. So every living thing was just frozen in time and still, and it wouldn't move. And it was that way for millennia. It just lasted and lasted and lasted. It was like being in hell. It was like being stuck in purgatory. I mean, if that was a glimpse of the afterlife, I do not want to fucking go. Oh my goodness. But man, it was bad. And here's the craziest part. When I finally came out of this, I looked down at my feet, and there was the steamroller sitting there with smoke still curling up out of the ball. It had only been a few seconds. And I heard faint laughter and felt a presence slyly escaping out of the room, like the salvia spirit or something was like making a troll face and going, "Ha, motherfucker, how'd you like that? I'm out. Peace." The craziest thing about that experience, and maybe I'm deluding myself, is that I feel like it instantly added hundreds and hundreds of years of wisdom and maturity to my personality in like a split second, because I just experienced eons of existence without really having to live that long. So when I came out of it, like my friend was standing there and he was like, "Are you okay, man?" And I'm like, I remember you. I saw you once a long, long time ago. Wow, how have you been, man? Dude, what are you talking about? It's only been a couple of seconds. Shit, really? Okay. You want to smoke another bowl? Yeah, sure, man. All right. So anyway, next experience, next drug. Let's talk about MDMA, methylene dioxymethamphetamine, aka ecstasy. Oh, baby. Now, I don't have any like unique experiences that to really relay to you guys about this drug, because every time I did it, it was like the amazing experience. I guess if I'm really going to give a sales pitch for any drug and kind of recommend it to people, it'd probably be this one. Although, you gotta be, this is dangerous stuff. It's bad for your brain. It can cause serotonin depletion system. It can burn out your serotonin neurons if you do it too much and you do it wrong. It gets complicated, but there's ways to do it safely. Like if you take a SSRI antidepressant like Prozac or something, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, about at the 5-hour, 6-hour mark after you drop the E, you'll protect yourself, at least in theory, against some of those effects. Because what basically happens is, what MDMA does is it kind of plugs up the the monoamine oxidase in your brain, so that the serotonin, instead of being cycled through and washed out like neurotransmitters usually are, it'll just like kind of build up and like plugging up the sink. It'll just start to pile up and be used over and over and over and over and over again. And serotonin is, I mean, we all know dopamine is the happy drug, but serotonin is the love chemical. This is just what makes you feel like positive emotion. And when you take MDMA, when you take some pure ecstasy, some good ecstasy, not MDA where they stop a process short before completely refining the chemical because it's expensive and hard to make. But when you get the real stuff, when you get the good stuff, I mean, currently right now, the last time I checked, this is being researched in clinical use to treat returning soldiers with PTSD, and I can totally understand why. Because this is the drug that allows you to open up and talk about things you would never feel comfortable talking about before. I mean, there is no such thing as being reserved on MDMA. Now, am I saying that it's a truth serum like sodium pentothal and people can just like interrogate you on it? No, it's not really like that. It's not like you have to talk about things, but you will talk about things. And before we even get to that, let's get to the physical effects. The physical effects are amazing. People talk about how good heroin feels. Well, yeah, heroin feels good, but it feels good in a dumb way. It's like, yeah, you feel like you're floating on a pillowy cloud being massaged by God himself, but you know, it's like a pointless kind of feeling. But with this stuff, it's like every nerve cell in your body just explodes like a fucking M80. Like the slightest touch feels like a blowjob. Like a feather could brush against your hand, and you'll be like, oh. You'll experience hot and cold in different ways, and in very good ways. If you're standing outside and like the breeze is just kind of lightly blowing over your skin, it's just it's indescribable. There's really no way I could try to describe it, but you just can't. I mean, the reason why they call it rolling instead of tripping when you're on MDMA is because your eyes roll back in your head. It feels that good. But it's not really the physical effects that are the most important thing about this drug. It is the mental and emotional effects. This stuff will make you love your enemies. This stuff will make you be in love with the entire world. People who you just met are like your best friend that you've known for years. I mean, you could walk up to a perfect stranger and just be like, oh man, it's you. Wow, I am so happy to see you. How have you been, man? How are the kids? How's the family? How is everything? Really? Yeah, my life's been good too. And of course, you know, to everybody else, you just seem like a creepy, sweaty weirdo that's like acting like a weirdo. But to you, it's amazing. I mean, this is like the coolest drug ever. This stuff does lead to a lot of junky behaviors because it's one of these kind of drugs that there's just a million and a half ways to make the trip quote unquote better. Like for example, if you're watching some spinning glow sticks whipping around in front of your face, it makes it better. If you're listening to some bass heavy electronic music and the speakers are just thumping through your bones, it feels better. And if somebody takes one of those Vicks Vapor Rub pen things that like a Vicks Vapor Rub inhaler and like cuts a big hole in the end and just blows it at your face, you will actually experience some Einstein-like time dilation. Like everything just draws out your field of vision. Time slows down, and like if there's music playing, it like when it happens, it goes from and it like I can't explain. Just time warps when you're on this stuff, and it's crazy shit. So, okay, Fakesagan, Christopher Anderson, whatever. You got more drug experiences, more drug stuff to talk about to us? Guys, I got a million drug stories, but I'm going to be late for church. The opiate of the masses. I got to get ready. So, and bottom line, final thing I want to say in this video, final thought, kids, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad, okay? Seriously, you know, I mean, I'm sure to you guys listening to this video, you're like, well, you sound like you've had some amazing experience and transformative experiences, so aren't you being a hypocrite telling other people not to do this stuff? I, sure, I did have some transformative experiences, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I really don't think it was anything that I couldn't have achieved without the drugs. You know, you can open up and be emotionally honest with strangers without drugs. I fucking do it here on YouTube. You can, you know, you could possibly have a psychic experience without drugs, to the extent to which you believe that happens at all. Um, you know, as far as having good physical feelings and orgasms and stuff like that, you can have that without drugs. Um, you can have a near-death experience without drugs. So the bottom line is, you know, as cool and interesting as they are, when you get right down to it, it's really kind of a waste of time. It really is kind of a waste of money. Like, when all is said and done, you'll look back on it and say, well, that was really interesting, but what was the point? What did it all mean? Why did I even really do that? I could have done all this stuff on my own. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That's all the news that's fit to print. Keep it fake.